Constance Hockaday is a TED Fellow and an artist, and she did a TED Talk where she asked about, if you're going to die tomorrow, what would you want to do? But the focus of this talk is not just sort of mental gymnastics. It's about the urgency of giving people a sense of agency and power, and how this sometimes unlocks a bigger question about who are we, what are we doing to live into our experiences fully and showing up fully. And she talks about this captain she met of a transatlantic community raft. Yes, you heard that right. And she really drops us as listeners of this TED Talk into this idea that we should not be afraid to go to the edges of our own imagination and our own desires at work, because we're at work trying to pull from ourselves the best version of ourselves, the best way we can serve our community. And if we're asleep at the wheel because we're not being asked the right questions, we just show up kind of in a halfway space. And I really think this is worth a conversation. And who better to have it with than Constance, because she works as the Director of Organizational and Leadership Development at Find Help. So she's right in the trenches. She sees people succeeding and failing all the time. But her parallel world is as a really productive, provocative artist who makes public art that is interactive, that really calls us to the mat, to have these experiences, to be inside the artistic experience, and through that kind of drop into our own issues or secret desires. She doesn't mince words, and she doesn't shy away from giving us a chance to really be inside something. So you can also look her up online, just going to, I think it's ConstanceHockaday.com, because she's just prolific and amazing. Okay, Constance, let's dig into this whole idea of being inside a very corporate space, which doesn't feel very artsy, and yet bringing to it a very artsy aesthetic. Tell me how this happened for you first and foremost, and how you gained the confidence to understand the links between the two.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. You really wove it all together. I do like the question, how does a weirdo artist like me end up in corporate culture, leading like executive retreats and talking to people about polarity management? It has been a really weird ride, I will say, but it's been perfect for me. So a lot of, I've been an artist. I've been an artist since, pretty much since I met the Raft people when I was 19 years old. But alongside that introduction into the Raft people who go by the name the Floating Neutrinos, there was in the work that we were doing, building rafts, going on adventures, stuff like that, there was a deep sense of community building, of serving a higher purpose, a deep value system. We had practices. We had a culture of feedback, of honest communication. We had, and this is kind of what I tried to get at in that talk, is, we had like practices, processes, and procedures, like things that made that group possible, and created a bond that allowed the group to do the types of things that it did. And so that part of it, that sort of organizational design, organizational development, that culture building thing, like it's kind of always been there and always been a part of all of my art projects as well. I'm interested in participatory design. I'm interested in responding to the needs that I see around me. And so I ended up going to graduate school for socially engaged art, and and then I got another master's degree alongside that in conflict resolution. And so after graduate school, I made work for probably the next few decades, and funny enough, when I got a senior TED fellowship, and in that fellowship class, they mix us up with all these different types of people. So you're in a cohort, and it's me. I'm like this weirdo artist, and then there's a war photographer and an animator and a screenplay writer and a small like a MIT cancer researcher and a startup, a software, SaaS, software as a subscription startup that's interested in building a database for free and reduced cost programs, and a filmmaker, that kind of thing. And so they put us all together, and we were in this cohort for 2 years. And in that 2 years, I came to really want to be more of service in a really tangible way. Like I love making art. I love making crazy art projects, but I wanted to be in, I wanted to do something, A, that made me money, right? Because we need money. And B, that I could be of service and in a regular way, not have to be sort of stuck in these fundraising cycles where, you fundraise and then you finally get the money and it takes however many years and then you finally produce the thing and you're so exhausted, and at the end of it you have nothing, and then you start over again, right? Like that's the life of a mid-career artist, whatever category artist I am. Um, so I was talking to my fellows forum, my TED Fellows forum, and I told them, look, I'm going to go into consulting. I really want to teach people how to communicate. I want to teach people how to work better together. I have brought all different types of people to work together on really impossible things, and I think that I have something to contribute to help others who are trying to do big impossible things work better together. And one of my fellows was like, hey, you know what? I'll be your first customer.
Constance, that's such a cool story. When you want to nail the sort of the perfect ecosystem for you as a thriving artist, what can you do to leverage your intelligence, leverage your perspective, be of service, and not be chasing the dollar all the time? So many artists struggle with this balance. I was a musician for 13 years, and I said I never wanted to be a bartender. I didn't like the culture. I didn't want it to hurt my back. And I learned so much about other industries because I got into them. I thought, what do I have to offer the world because I'm a good songwriter, because I'm a good performer? And I got really deep into the writing space and the branding space because of that, and then ultimately into podcasting. So I really relate to the urgency and the intensity of your search, and the ability for you to be in conversation here about, it's not just a gig, it's a correlation you draw, that that imbuing your fantastic perspective as an artist into the corporate culture, there is an urgency there to let people know, even though you've got this gig every day, you've got to stay buoyant, you've got to stay alive, you've got to challenge yourself. You have to take that right brain and wrap it around the left brain and really not get stuck. And I know that's the work we have to do to build leaders, to get them to understand that they have to be holistic leaders and be powerful leaders. And conversations like this can really light up the way for both artists and corporate people to see that there's a constant conversation happening. It's a fantastic loop. But I want to go back to this idea that you look at environment, you look at mortality, and you look at community, you look at collaboration, you look at all these things, and there's something artistic about that. But I want to know how you are able to include people in your way of thinking without losing them. So to the extent that someone is listening to this right now and they're like, wait, where do I fit into this conversation? How do I take this fabulous energy and bring it back to my life? Can you talk to me about the perceived impasse between people that are so different, a corporate drone, someone who's just like working all day, and someone who's being an artist all day? How do you welcome them into your headspace? And what programs have you done so far that really sort of can illuminate that path? Like, can you give us an example of that? Because I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. Like, how does this actually work? Thanks for indulging us.
Okay, so the way that I'm going to try to answer this question is to talk about exceptionalism and the fact that I just don't actually really, I'm just not into it. I don't believe it. I don't believe that artists are exceptional. I don't believe that the tech founder is exceptional. I don't really, I'm not into this idea of the hero, the founder as the hero, the CEO as the hero, the artist as the hero. I think we all bring very, very important gifts, and some of those gifts come in the form of our work and our careers and some sort of contribution that we make to the world order, and some of those gifts come in less visible ways. And I think that what is most important, it's not about how do we wake up those people that are corporate drones. That leaves me in that sort of exceptionalism space. And I want to get past that. I want to get to a place where we can be really honest with ourselves about what it is that we want from this life, from this moment. Because the sooner that we can start articulating what it is that we want or what it is that we need, if we can become fluent in that language with ourselves and then with others, we have a much better chance at having healthy relationships in our personal lives, healthy relationships in the workplace. We have a much better chance at building creative solutions to in service of actual desires, right? We can, the floating neutrinos, for example, they built rafts in service to their desire to free up their time, to free up their relationship to a landlord. And so the design of this raft or living on the water was in service to that desire. And so there are these creative solutions that can be born and I would argue to say more sustainably if we are responding to clear and honest desire, request, need, however you want to talk about it. But the thing about that is that we have to practice articulating that. And it doesn't happen overnight. This is probably something that is more valuable for younger leaders to learn. But I also think that people who have been stuck in a certain way of working, and that way is not working anymore. When you get to that place where you're like, well, what got us here is not going to be what gets us there, right? That's the moment to really start to connect to the core, the three deepest desires, the thing that is actually the most important to you in this life or in this project or whatever that thing is. And if you can connect to that honestly, I think that desire can lead the way to make the types of changes that you need to make in your life or your leadership style or the way that you run your business or the way that you show up to your family. And so I'm not sure if this is helping, but, my art practice, for example, I built a floating hotel outside of New York City. Why did I do that? Because I wanted a way. I was yearning for a way to be closer to the water, yearning for a way to have a relationship with the waterfront in New York City. And there was really no way to do that. There was no place to rest your body or even be close to it. And so I wanted to build infrastructure that would allow for me to have that type of relationship and bring other people into that relationship with the waterfront, like as a place where bodies belong, where you can have a relationship with the space and steward it, etc. And so that led to me building a certain type of infrastructure, this floating boat hotel that was called the Botel, that hosted like 5,000 people and ended up being like a pretty amazing like moment in the summer of 2011. And so maybe I'm answering your question. Maybe I'm not. Happy to give it another go. Really enjoying this.
Constance, I love your answer to this. It's a very specific example when you talk about like the floating homes and the floating hotel, because you're really saying, get out of your own way around this idea of labels and perfectionism and who has the right to do what. And, how we define ourselves can limit ourselves, and we know this. And yet in our society we have, that's an artist, and that's a CEO, and that's a doctor. And it's such a deep groove that we fall into. It's like when you follow telemarketing and someone skied ahead of you, you're just in their groove. And sometimes you're going along and you have no idea that you're just not even looking around because you're in this other person's trajectory, not your own. And, it's very liberating to hear your own connection to wanting to do something because you didn't want to not do it, creating that hotel, allowing people to have interaction with it. It's very inspiring. And I think people aspire to get out of their own way and just do the messy thing. I want to pivot to, your disaster capitalism that you're doing with the project. I think it's called Disaster Furniture Showroom. And I think what you're doing in that piece is you're trying to really disrupt our perception of what it is to be truly prepared, but isn't it just being truly manipulated? You really, it's powerful. I'm gonna do the link here, and I guess part of deconstructing is surrendering. When you pick things apart, they can fall apart, and I think people are afraid to fall apart. I want to, maybe you could speak to the disaster marketing mentality and maybe draw that parallel for us. Because this whole title of Dying Tomorrow, Impact Leadership Today, how much does fear marketing play a role in people's, urgency and understanding of what they should do next?